Lewis-Peart, and our talk is going to be on the transgressive and transformative power of I am. I'm going to start with a confession first. I am not a biblical scholar. I don't consider myself a theologian. I'm a preacher and a teacher, which for me at least means that I'm a storyteller. The funny thing about stories, though, is that we get caught up in whether stories are fact or fiction. We give things greater credence based upon how true they are. As a minister, I'm less interested in the stories that are fact or fiction. I'm interested in whether the story is factual. Stories are meant to transmit a greater truth. And if a story is told with enough energy, life, it should, hopefully, reach towards that greater truth. So, as I talk to you today, don't be too caught up on the fact or the fiction. Let's just be stubborn on the idea of whether or not this is an effectual story. And what better person to start with than the life and times of Jesus? Jesus. There's no greater name, he said, yeah? Mm-hmm. However you feel about Jesus, whatever your thoughts or opinions, there was something amazing about the life of this man from Galilee. And so I'm going to focus today, because you can pick from most any place, but I'm going to focus today on the Gospel of John. And I'm going to bounce around, so bear with me, yeah? And don't feel, and I want to reiterate to you, that we come from a tradition where interaction is part of the process. This is not school in the sort of traditional sense. There won't be notes afterwards, and there will be no pop quizzes. And if you feel so moved, or if you feel so concerned, feel free to let out a little, So the Gospel of John begins. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life is the light of men. And the light shined in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. John was a preacher. John was a really good preacher. He stood outside the margins of the sort of established religious community. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, the elites, the learned men of God, the holy people. Long lineage of advisors and spiritual leaders. And here was this man who was bathing people in the water. And he had a strong following, but one of his most interesting subjects that he baptized was this man named Jesus. He too was a bit of a preacher, an up-and-coming one of sorts, yeah? Mm-hmm. And John was so good of a preacher that many had even thought that perhaps he was the Messiah that people had talked about. This king that would come and bring about the true might again of Israel that hadn't been seen since the times of King David. What was interesting though, that John knew that it wasn't him. And he told them, he said, it's not me. I'm good, but I'm not that good. There's one that will come after me who will do awesome things. And then was Jesus. Now, you know that there was a time, and we really don't have any real account of where Jesus was. Right? So all of a sudden he sort of pops into the sea and does some interesting things. And at first no one really takes any mind, right? You have to understand that at that time, there was a lot of preachers and teachers, gurus of all sorts of types. That was not an odd thing at that particular time. But remember, my focus, my interest is on efficacy. This man was effective. Not only was he learning for someone who hadn't come through the line of spiritual leaders and advisors at the Pharisees, but he was able to make practical these teachings to the masses. And then throw into the mix that he could do some miracles here and there. What awesomeness. And all of a sudden, people start to take notice. All kinds of people start to take notice. But who really takes notice is the religious elite. Uh-oh. Who is this man? Who is this man? And so they set their sights on him. In fact, they sent people out to observe him. We need to figure out what this guy's about. He's a little different than what we're used to. He's not quite the street preachers that we thought he might be. He's effective. Too effective, actually. He might wrestle power from us. So they sent out people to observe him. At the time, we have to, and we want to link it back to our own understandings. There was a certain level of religious fundamentalism that existed at that particular time. There was an elite who was in charge of all things sacred and holy. And then there were the masses, whose job was to simply receive. There were laws that people had to adhere to quite strictly, and would be enforced if you fell out of line. There was an adherence to the law that was a little bit problematic at some points, because law is focused upon what you know. And these men, these Pharisees and Sadducees and all these other religious people knew a lot, but they understood very little. And here comes this man, the son of a carpenter, now able to take the law and make it live. He understood. And so these men set out to see where he trips up. Let's capture in some of what he's to know about. That's what they tested him multiple times. One of the most interesting stories that I took out of John was when they brought to him the adulteress. And they said, "Well, Mr. Spiritual man, you know the word. Tell us, what do we do with her?" Now, their hope was to catch him on something. If he went with what the law stated, she would have to be stoned. And most of his followers were those people who were at the margins. The fornicators, and the adulterers, and the prostitutes, and the this and that. His congregation was the outcasts. So by stoning her, agreeing with the leadership at the time she was stoned, knew that he thought of a lot of the people who were coming during his works. But remember, Jesus was smart. He knew the law, but he also understood it. And he said, "Okay, you're right. She should be stoned. However, one stipulation. He who has not sinned will cast the first stone." But we'll stone her. For sure, let's stone her. The law says that what must be done. But stipulation. All of those of us who have not sinned will be able to throw the stone. All of a sudden, all the loud, boasting people got quiet. Because you can put on whatever you want to put on for whoever, but you know in your heart of hearts, we've all fallen short in some way. You don't have to know my sin for me to know my sin. You can rock for Where are thine accusers? Where are thine accusers? Now they're upset. They tried to trip him up, set him up, and he turned around. Now we're forgetting all formalities. Let's really get to the heart of the matter. So we hear, the rumor is that you think that you are the Son of God. Let's just call a thing a thing. Enough of these games and going over chapter and verse. You believe that you are the Son of God. Blasphemer. I am. Not only am I, but I am the way, the truth, and the life. Did you hear it? Did you hear that? Did you hear what he said? Did you hear that? Now we got him now. Now we got him, Lord. We got him. Now back to what I said. That religion, I'm not interested, is an effective. In my tradition, in my understanding, we recognize Jesus as the master teacher, a way shower, an example. What he was able to do was acknowledge the divinity that existed within him and bring it to its fullest expression in the world. At a time where people believed God to be some separate, distant deity far, far away, he was able to claim a relationship with that. So much so to call him our Father. How much closer can you get than to call God your Father? And then to take it a step further and to say that I and the Father are one. And that when you see me, you see my Father. What a claim to make. What a claim to make. But oftentimes we get caught up on this idea of claiming, and even Pharisees and Sadducees at the time, how boastful and arrogant, how many and prideful we used to believe that you are a part of God. Because we've understood God as this exclusive thing. Jesus understood that once you claim the divine and claim the relationship with the divine, it is not just for you. Sartre says that when you choose for everyone. Every choice that we make in life, we choose not only for ourselves, but for everybody else. When Jesus made that affirmation for himself, he recognized that which existed in him. He also allowed for us to recognize that also exists with us. Jesus was the example, not the exception. He understood the power of recognizing that we have always been in relationship with that great I am. And that I am that exists is bigger than you. In 1984, someone dipped a cup into the ocean and set it on the table. I want you to sit, bro. And set it on the table and called it David. They told David what David was. Black, boy, and all the other stories that come with the cup. And at some point, David believes that David is David. And not only does David believe, but David identifies with David. I am David, son of... No. No. Son of, born here. My problem, my story. And somehow we get lost in the story of the cup and forget that in fact the cup is just a vessel holding the ocean water. And so we go around the sun a couple times in blissful ignorance. We go around the sun a couple times in blissful ignorance. We go around the sun a couple times until sickness, disease, and death shoots our cup up. And we fall on the ground. And that with which we are returns back to its source. I believe that Jesus understood that God was the great I am, the ocean, and that he, like us, are cups, vessels. But who we really are, truly, truly are, the likeness and image in which we are made is spiritual, not physical. I'm made in the likeness and image of God. God is not a man. God is spirit, and we must worship him in spirit and in truth. I am spiritual, having a physical experience for a time And that which I am, that which I really am, existed long before me. Jesus knew that too. Before Abraham was, I am. What do you mean before Abraham was? What is he talking about? You have to understand that Jesus has been co-opted by the conservative. People have reformulated the story of Jesus to their particular agenda, but we have to understand that in his time he was a radical. What he was saying shook up the established elite organizations and institutions that thought that they knew God because they knew law. These learned men who knew God, they knew much and understood little. I don't think that we are out of that experience of time. I actually think that we're in a very similar place of time. People will pick up knife and, in some instances, pen to destroy others because of their particular interpretation, denomination, affiliation. People calling a holy war on each other because my God is greater than your God. And it says so in my sacred text. And they'll die for that. For what they think that they know. But for all of what they know, they understood not. There's one request that I ask of myself, God, give me wisdom. Give me wisdom. I've been to school, they talk a lot, but they can't teach me wisdom. Lord, you alone can give me that discernment, understanding. In all I get, understanding. There's a power in recognizing the divinity that exists in you. I know that sounds like a funny thing to say, especially in a world that's been taught that I have, that I use. But to stand in the truth of I am, that you are connected to your source, that you are in a relationship already with the Father. It's a powerful and transformative act. That just even in your life, the statement of I am has an effect. I am is a creative statement. We know that our words that amongst us flesh in the world. That our mouths have power to create, but they can also have power to destroy. And there's a lot of I ams that we're claiming in our lives that are really worse things to us. So, what's my point? My point is this. Jesus was radical, a revolutionary. He understood the relationship that he had to God. He claimed it and aimed it in spite of others calling him boastful, prideful, vain, confused, and even playing demon on him. He claimed his divinity, and they killed him for it. Because they thought that he was separate and apart. In fact, what he knew is that once you claim the divine in you, there are truths for you too. And for you. And for you. And for all of us. That there's one body of God. No one has exclusive access. There is one body of God. Do not be confused. Your cup might be Christian. Mine might be Hindu or Jew. But there's one body in which we all are connected to. And that we'll all return back to when we're done. In the East, they say namaste. The spirit in me bows to the spirit in you. Once I acknowledge that there's a spirit that dwells within me, it's not an exclusive thing to claim what I am. It's an inclusive thing. It recognizes that there's room at the table for absolutely everybody. Jesus was an example, not an exception, of what it means to live your highest in thyself. He still didn't know that I